All right, we will get back to order. And now we move on to community and protective services.
Yes, move on to services. So first up, building maintenance. This was a new area that we created its own budget for just this past year. Before that, we had sort of sprinkled through everyone else's budgets. We've now pulled this into one area. A little bit of work in progress to adjust some of the amounts that are in here. But what we see before of you today, we have under the contracted services, we had some maintenance projects that were in the budget for 2021 being removed, and of course the transfer from reserve at the bottom also because they were funded from reserves. There's been also just an alignment to better match some of the trends that they're seeing. In the service changes column, there's 31,000 for the request for preventative maintenance. So these includes such items as pausing a little bit too long. Okay, thank you. So preventative maintenance practices such as HVAC inspections, duct cleaning on a 3-year rotation to around the organisation, roof inspections also on 3-year rotations, and also the maintenance and for a replacement, possible replacement of bay doors on that as well. So that's the 31,000 request there. Also 5,000 for some small tools for the building maintenance people on a yearly basis as well. So that's their requests for building maintenance. Any questions? Moving on to the area we call public health. This is, as we mentioned earlier, the only building that the medical centre is in, as well as a residence for medical staff if needed. So, as you see here, not really a very much change at all from last year. And the additional budget requests, you'll see here, reinstitution. We did do it for a number of years and removed it for when we had COVID in our emergency budget, and last year as well. This is the start of some of those revenues offsetting taxation being moved from that to reserves. We've chosen this one first. There is a lease on this building that at the end is I think 4 years left. If we did this for the next 4 years, we would remove our reliance on that offsetting taxation and move that out to a reserve. So it offsets taxation, no longer offsets taxation, and also goes to our reserves. So that's our request for an additional budget item under public health. Any questions?
Just an observation. I see on every category an increase for insurance is pretty prevalent. Just an observation.
The doctor's clinic that we currently own, how is the building itself? Is it ever is it in good shape, or are we ever looking at having to do upgrades or maintenance to that building? Just wondering. I don't know how old the building is, but
I think part of the preventative maintenance part that they're asking me may have impact on that too. I don't know if we have done an assessment of that. I'd have to check into that for you. Right. Moving on to policing. So under our contracted and general services, we see an increase there for the alignment for the cost of our photo radar contract, as mentioned earlier. To come in alignment with that contract, need to put some money back into that area. Under what's called purchases from other governments is the operational increase for the RCMP, and this is based on just ongoing from 2022 onwards. At this stage, it doesn't address any retro pay that might come our way. We've not received an invoice. We'll bring that back with the options once that is received. And then just some minor increases for supplies. And here you'll see under transfers from reserves, that second one down, capital revenue sharing, the 220, that's another one where we would like to start moving out eventually to reserve, so we don't have our reliance on revenue sharing offsetting our operations. Any questions on policing?
How many officers would be operating?
I believe 17.
17?
And I believe we are fully staffed or fully allocated. We do have some that are on medical, but
Does that include any administrative?
no administration's on top of that.
And we pay that too.
We paid portion, I think we paid 4.5, 5.
How many extra RCMP there? In the past years, we used to have traffic and other ones.
Yes, we have the traffic unit, identification services, 2, 4, 6, 8. I think we got 12 or 14 upstairs.
Extra staff that could be boots on the ground. Okay, thanks.
And what is the cost per member?
I'll defer that. Maybe Mr. Schramm can help me with the cost per member. No? Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, again, our budget was about 2.2 million for those 17 officers.
So do the math.
Do the math, it's about 100 and.
Where's the big adding machine?
120, 130, yeah, that sounds about right.
How much?
125 to 130.
That includes benefits. Right, okay.
And no discussions to add.
The current staff sergeant field, the current levels are quite adequate.
Next section we have under Community Protective is the fire department. As you can see from last year to this year, there's not really a lot here, just again the increase from insurance and electricity that has been through just about everyone that we've seen here. Any questions on the fire department?
Just wondering about things like mental health supports or things like that for fire department. Is that something that is covered here, or is there another section that sort of covers that? Just think that just now, like more than ever, providing those supports for our firefighters is necessary. And if it's something that we can provide or should be providing, then we should be doing that and having sure all of our volunteer officers have access to that. So.
Mr. Shane has anything to add?
Yeah, I can talk to that. We do take our mental health for our first responders very seriously. Internally, what we've done through our programming within this budget is we've got a lot of our current staff trained up in critical incident stress management. We're also a partner in a provincial team where we have those accesses. Something if it's a big impact within another community that they need those supports, we can send some of our members to do that support and get that reciprocating back. So if it's directly affecting our members and our people who are affected, that provincial network will send other people who are trained to the same level to our community to help our emergency first responders as well. So we do take it very seriously. And our team is very active in understanding their roles and getting the training that they need for.
Thank you.
Nothing further, we can move on to disaster. Here is not really that much difference from 2021. Included in this budget, though, we did have an amount for COVID expenses that was funded from the COVID relief reserve. We've dropped that by, was that 50,000? We have used 15 of that, I think so far, into the usage of that, I should say. So we dropped that down by 20 for next year, so we still have 30 in there. It is funded from the COVID relief reserve, so it doesn't have impact on taxation, but left an amount in there because COVID's not really over yet. So it's in there for anything that might crop up. Yes.
Through to Mr. Schramm, when was the last time we had a mock disaster, either tabletop or live, real?
Our last tabletop exercise would have been late 2019, for 2020, 2021, because of the COVID response. 2020 was basically right off, no communities down. 2021, we're in the process right now. I've engaged a consultant to give me some ideas as to do some training. We have a lot of new staff, and then follow up the tabletop with that new staff.
Thank you.
We're on to the 911 centre. This is another area that is cost shared, but it's the other way around. Cost shared with the county, with them having us support them. As far as operations go, there wasn't going to be very much change. Where there is a one-time cost for replacement of the CAD system, which is the program that runs the dispatch. One thing that I think of note in this area here is it does also other things for us as well. It actually monitors our emergency after hours number, runs our truck radios, things like that. So it's not just purely 911. So for that, there was an extra about 61,000 in that budget. I'm proposing funding that from the Public Safety Initiative Reserve. So any questions on 911? Go to community assessment. There was minor changes here. Again, we've increased the fines a little bit as our traffic enforcement program will grow. We've removed some of their legal expenses as we're centralising them within the executive office. And there was some extra cost last year for setting up CPO1 positions, but that was also funded from the Public Safety Initiative, so you see that counteract here. So any questions on community enforcement? See none?
I do have a question. We at strategic planning talked about the school zones and the signage around school zones and changing that to be more consistent throughout the community. Is there any budget in there to change that signage? I remember it was fairly expensive. Mr. Schramm?
Yeah, what we've done is our Forest Services Manager is back now. We do have that plan. We did look at some of the funding on a preliminary cost of, again, our previous CPO did some costing out on those signs, about $10,000, which we could probably observe through our Public Safety Initiative Fund. And again, the big challenge is, not challenge, but the other part of that is coordinating with our operations department to make sure that they can do the installation. So that's a project that we do want to get moving forward. Just an FYI, we did have a conversation this week to just make sure that it is in alignment with our full enforcement program, and it will meet the full enforcement program requirements as well. We may have to reach out to the Solgen just to make sure that those time changes aren't going to be impacted on the zone justification. So that's some of the work we'll be doing shortly. Okay.
They're making changes to the Solicitor General's office is making changes to the school zone types.
Just to clarify, we are looking at strategic planning is converting some of our school zones to playground because they're duplicated, which would have a predetermined playground time.
Yeah, 8:30
So we just want to make sure that if we do make that change from the school zone to the playground time frame, that's still going to meet our justification sheets.
Most schools have playgrounds.
Moving on to
Not all of them, but most.
parts parks area. There's been some adjustments here, just amongst different costing centres. We did have some $20,000 of benches that were being installed along the trail system in 2021. That's being removed from the budget. As you'll see, it was actually funded down in the transfers from reserves from Eddie's Big Run Reserve. So we were able to fund those benches. There was some, with the insurance costs, etc. They did some, as I say, changes within their own structure, and were able to find $15,000 that they have put down under the correction and trends to the parks equipment reserve that had been depleted quite a lot over the last few years. So they found some savings within their operations to bring that down and start replenishing that reserve. Any questions on parks?
So I have a couple. So during the election, I don't know if this would fall in with parks, but heard from residents at Parkland Lodge the need for benches on 47th Street. So many seniors are walking to A&W or down in that general direction. Can we include some funds to put a few benches, considering that's a vulnerable population and they need places to sit if they are going to be active? That would be a budget request I would have. And the other piece, which I've asked about a few times now, which we haven't included funds for, is lighting for the Griffith Park basketball courts as well as the dog park at Griffith Park. We have a lot of kids that go out there and are playing basketball at night. And it gets dark, 8 o'clock, and they have to pull up with their vehicles. And I think just a good opportunity to enhance that area and provide a positive place where they're getting physical activity instead of doing some of the other stuff in the community. So those are some budget requests that I have for council's consideration. I know we have the lights at the old dog park. I don't know if they could just be moved over or not, but. Councilor Evan.
Is the old dog park used a lot?
I have done not quite a bit, but I've done some drive-bys, and surprisingly, it is used quite a bit. A lot of vehicles are pulling there with their larger dogs to run. I had the same question for this summer with the new one opening up in town, so I did make a purpose of mine just to kind of monitor a little bit, and quite surprised it's being used quite a bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, we've got 2 of them, one's across the track, and people get caught across the tracks, and we're maintaining 2 dog parks. Can we get rid of one and just use the in-town one all the time? And move the lights and the old fire hydrants over there and set that up to be really nice.
An option, if it is used, I know that.
Yeah, I see both being used. Some prefer the old one, especially if they have bigger dogs. It's not as widely used as the other one, so we have to maintain that field anyway, so. Go ahead, Councilor.
I've also heard some of the comments about the benches near Parkland Lodge, and because it's an area that's not just the lodge, but there's other locations that the seniors reside in that kind of few block radius, and also going down to A&W that they want to do that, but and they enjoy getting out, but have certain challenges because there are no places to rest.
Val, or Christine, had your hand up?
No.
Oh, okay, it's fresh.
Yeah.
Through what the mayor was saying here, like bigger dogs are running out there across the tracks. Here's an idea. You got 2 ball diamonds back to back. There was one as a dog park. Take out that fence and make that one big dog park. Because the other diamond, nobody uses it. We keep it maintained. Nobody ever goes on it. So let's just combine those 2 diamonds and you got one great big dog park. Just thought.
Definitely take that into consideration.
Yeah. Maybe more people will move the in-town, use the in-town one because it'll be 2 or 3 times the size.
Anything further for parks discussion? On to cemetery. Here with that up to the base is just the increases for insurance and electricity. They have additional budget request of 10,000 for a site survey and cemetery plan. Within this budget, I have proposed that that gets funded from the capital cemetery reserve. That's the changes for cemetery, if there's any questions. To FCSS, I realise this is another acronym that is for Family and Community Support Services. Again, there was, as you see, within the corrections and trends, there was just a reallocation of what was actually sort of how our funds were being dispersed to community organisations, and moved it down into where it belongs in the grants rather than a contracted service. And apart from that, there really was not a lot of change within FCSS. Any questions for that? For the public transportation area, these are grants that go out to societies such as the Seniors Transportation Society, Scope, McMahon, to help with their transportation needs. There's no change from 2021. Any questions on?
I have a question. You said McMahon, have they ever got any grants from us? I know the community, seniors transportation always puts in, but I've never ever seen one from McMahon.
I believe they have. I would have to go back into the details to find that out. The 41,000 isn't all for seniors transportation. It does go to other groups that apply.
Right.
There is an application process for that.
It is the only bus with a wheelchair lift in town, and a good portion of every day is utilized for moving people with special needs. So it's utilized by other groups for certain times of the day.
Well, I know Scope uses it and everything else, but I've never seen, I guess it's in McMahon, but I just wondering about the funding, if they get the funding or not.
Yeah, I will look back into some more detail for that and,
Yeah, okay.
and find that out for you.
Yeah, McMahon and School both have received operational grants for the last few years to help with their transportation needs as well as seniors.
On our premium services admin. This is an area again where we have cost sharing with the county. Actually, I should FCSS is also a cost sharing entity with the county. There's a population based cost sharing there, and it equates to around 25%. So sorry, I omitted to bring that up when we were on that page. Once we get into recreation, that's also a cost shared with the county. Again, it's a population-based formula, but generally comes out at around 35%. So this area here there are many areas within recreation where we have different departments. We have the programming, we have Repsol Base, for example, Griffith Park, and this is the administration of recreation on a higher level rather than those specific regions. So here, there was some adjustments for the cost sharing, obviously from what happens below, but obviously the increases we've spoken about. Last year we had a grant for ACEs, so that has been removed, as was the corresponding funding from the COVID reserve. And the other one in here, the 50,000 other expenses, was the sort of initiation of the Leisure Assist program, which was a program that people could apply for to help with funding for recreation programs that they were wishing to attend. We put 50,000 in there and funded it from the COVID reserve. 2021 probably wasn't the best year to see how the uptake on that was based on our closures and etc. But I have proposed to drop that down to 40 for 2022. This is funded from a reserve, so we have to be mindful if this is something that we wish to continue past the life of that reserve. This would be something that would be a taxation increase there, but And then hopefully we have some history and have more idea of the cost of that for the community. Any questions on admin? Community development, this is our program expenses, so this is where all of those expenses fall under this category here. From increases in revenues, sort of looking back towards a more normal year for 2022. And then there's been some reallocations within different areas. They do have an increase in electricity costs because under here is the cost for the building at Kinsman Park. I think it was called the Youth Shack. So those expenses fall under this category as well. Any questions on
One item for consideration, and I question whether it's here, it could be somewhere else, here from council. And of course, this Tuesday, we're gonna be hearing a report on the homelessness, addictions, mental health task force. And about what this department and what we can do within this department to provide funds to assist with that. Obviously, I do want to hear the presentation on Tuesday. Here to have discussions there, but I'm not sure if that's a budgetary item within this category. Is that where it would fall?
I may have to defer to Mr. Schramm.
I think it would be a little premature. I think the presentation on Tuesday will kind of set the path forward that this council may want to take and put into the appropriate area. I think there's options depending on the path that council wants to go down.
Okay.
How we find that, but I think it would be a little premature until you see that presentation Tuesday night to start identifying what we put into this workshop.
No, that's fine. As long as there's a spot within our budget where we're addressing that, it doesn't matter where, but I think that's something we need to start addressing. So thank you.
I've never seen the community development. So what is community development like? Someone explain it to me.
This is where we're bringing in all the revenues and costs for our programming. It used to be under Rec Admin in the old days, it was all jumbled together. But we wanted to pull that out into a separate area so that we could actually see what the programming was costing us.
Okay.
Yeah. Move on to Griffith Park. This was mostly this is related to the building that used to be the Boys and Girls Club. And we are now renovating that for a space for programming and for our community development team. So really what we see under the contracted services here is obviously some amounts that have been spent towards the project to date. But the remaining of that original budget is now being carried forward into 2022. With the project, we have applied for some grants. We're still waiting to hear back for some of those. So there may be a budget update based on the approvals of those grants, and we can bring that back to council to show if there's any additional, that budget versus funding framework from those grants being received. But here for now is just the continuation of that original budget.
Question on that, we're doing the work on Griffith Park ourselves, or did we end up hiring that out to somebody to renovate it and everything else? Because we had set a budget of, I can't remember what it was, 100.
181,
Yeah, and then we were gonna have somebody come in and do it, but then we started doing the work ourselves. Is that, we still doing that? That was holding up us trying to move into that building?
From what I understand, we are doing a lot of the work ourselves, and that's how we got to have that budget as it was. In the meantime, we have Mr. Schramm can jump in if I go off track, but we have applied for grants for enhancements to that facility. And once we know of those, we can, one of the grants is for a project that is holding up the rest of the restoration. So that would have to, if we are successful with that grant and have that installed, I believe it's for our Mr. Schramm.
Yeah, I can interject here. We're doing a lot of work internally. There's been quite a bit of reconstruction done in the facility already, in framing and everything. The holdup is really waiting on the heating and HVAC system grant. We don't want to proceed, like, we're kind of at that point now, we need to get that installed so we can finish up the rest of the project. I think once we get that done, and this is the grant we're waiting on, it's been a long process with this grant. We were led to believe early on in the summer, we talked to council about that grant, that it was basically a shoo-in grant, but then they later let us know that there were some things that we had to do to make sure. It's all been done, so we are in wait list now for the grant, and as soon as we get confirmation on that grant, we can move forward with that part. And then when that part is done, we can continue on internally with finishing off the bulk of the renovation. That's where we're at. We're in the wait to see on this HVAC grant. It's the one that's going to start right now.
Anything further for Griffiths?
And we got an accessibility grant for that as well, right?
Yes, please. And we move on to Rcmp Place. You see under the revenues there, that's reflecting the return to pre-COVID levels for our revenues at Rcmp. Under the expense side there, we have some increases based on some trends, an increase obviously for insurance again and electricity. And also an increase for chemicals for the regular closing and cleansing of the pool. Overall, I think we're keeping Rcmp open in anticipation for the new facility. So any questions on Rcmp?
Question that, maybe this is coming later, how long do we keep our security people there?
I believe we actually have just advertised for some casual employees to take over that for us.
Oh,
I'm not quite sure exactly when the security is. Okay, I'll go to
Field
the
average.
Thank you, thank you.
I did note that within our weekly update.
Oh, I didn't read it.
No worries. And essentially we are advertising for the possibility of having employees actually deal with this. As we recognized when we brought this forward, it was a temporary measure as far as the security guards to assess the initial stages. So we're hoping that we will be able to move forward with this in the near future.
Security is on a week-to-week contract.
yeah,
So as soon as we hire, we can give notice.
so we get rid of them. Will our staff, or we hire, be having a reader to read the codes and the QR codes? I know some places don't have them right now and really having a hard time, people coming in or whatever. So,
Our IT has got it figured out.
okay.
On Rcmp. Go to our last department category. It's culture. This is where any expenses for our library, museum, cultural aspects of our community go through here. Again, just there was some minor increases for the museum and the library, and that really was an increase in insurance, and that was the only change from last year to this year.
So what are the breakdowns of the library grant compared to the museum grant?
The museum is looking for 2,600 more, and the library for 10,000 more.
And what was the total of that?
Of each one.
Yeah.
Total for the library is 340,450, and the museum 258,000.
Thank you. Right, no further questions on culture. It's the final department run through. So just bring you back to discussions we had earlier, and as a refresher, because that was a few hours ago now. Gone back to the 4.99 slide. Just a reminder of the now that we've been through all the departments, the amounts that make up the obligations, the subsidizations, and then other. And also what we have done is all of those service change requests and additional budget requests We have combined them all into this one area here, so that you may see them all in one place. And even that is brought into two separate areas. These are ones that have taxation impact. And the next page are ones that we have proposed to be funded from reserves. So I'll just open that up for any questions from council on these. These are ones we can sit back and forth through if people have questions on.
On here you got roof inspections. Is that on all our home buildings? That also includes the doctors over here doing that?
Yes, it would. So to do inspections on,
Okay, so
we
all
have
of
a
ours.
3 year, so there'll be some 1 year, some the next, so we'll
Okay.
do a rotation like that so that we can keep an eye on the roof. And just for the next slide, I'll move to just for information here is the impact of taxation increase on property taxes. To keep in mind as discussions are happening. So under residential, looking at the 4.99. We've split it into 200,000 of assessment, and then a $350,000 house and maybe a $500,000 house. And non-residential, again, 100,000 of assessment, but some larger totals for them. So you can see on the left the impact on a tax notice for the 4.99 between the both years. On the right-hand side, a decrease of 1% from that 4.99, and what that would do. So on a $350,000 house, the 4.99 would add 106. If we went to 399, it would save, bring it down by $2 million a year, and 299 would be $42 a year. And just keep in mind also that 1% is equating to $112,000 of our budget that would that needs to be removed for that. Also on the handout that you sent around, we also have done the amount for all of the things that was in this budget, the 7.74. And again, with that 1% decrease and the effect on the tax notices, or the impacts on their tax notices for 2022. Well, that's a lot of information there. So I'll open up for council discussion, and I can zip back and forth between the slides for.
So I got two questions. So what is the dollar amount change in electricity costs from 2021 to what's being proposed in 2022? And same thing with insurance. What are the dollar amounts there?
So for electricity, the difference is just shy of 110,000 for the entire organisation. The insurance, we don't have that bill yet. I think we added 7 or 8%, 7% to our existing insurance bill to put that into the 2022 budget as a placeholder. But we did add 7% to that. That was around $22,000. There we go.
So between those two, it's just over 1%. The tax increase just for those two. Basically, it was in fuel. Fuel would be the other big increase, I'd imagine.
Fuel, I did liaise with the interim GM for infrastructure and planning, and he informed me that he felt that the budget we had would be sufficient for what was already there.
Okay, thank you.
So,
So where are we cutting?
I'll ask, is there anything that we can cut that administration hasn't already included in the budget?
administration has gone through this fairly thoroughly a few times and cut where we found we could, like for example, when we took that professional development, went back and did some of those types of cuts. And I see if Rich has anything to add to this, but I think we have gone through quite a number of times and done the cuts where we see that can be done. As you know, with the 4.99, that was actually 3.3 of that is those obligations that we have. And the decreased subsidizations really makes up the rest of that, because we cannot keep subsidizing at that same rate, because those reserves will run out, and then there will be a large jump in our taxation to keep things where we are.
Okay, so if we need to cut, then we need to start looking at our service levels.
That would be one, yes. Options.
So this proposed 7.7 is zero subsidized or is still subsidized there?
The 7.6 is still subsidized.
So if we do everything without cutting, we're looking at 7.74% tax increase?
If you said for us to go ahead with everything we had presented,
Correct, yeah,
that would be that, yes.
And how much subsidized is in here then?
That was the 1.67%.
1.7,
would be
so we'd
with
be
the-
looking at 9.5 with no subsidy. So we got lots of work to do then. And we're gonna finalize budget spring, so we have time.
Leasing is a big piece of that, electricity and insurance,
Yeah.
and then the subsidies from COVID.
Buy all smart cars, there's a reduction in smart cars, there's a reduction in fuel.
Big statement. We're gonna go by horseback.
But
You know what the price of hay is?
bylaw, can't have horses in town and poop on the lawn. And that goes back a long way.
Well, I'm thinking anybody raising their hands here. I don't think 7.74 is a palatable percentage. But we need to find the appropriate balance here.
How much did that tar cost again?
Well, and there's some asks there too, to increase our road budget and some other things, so. What's on the optional list? We go through the optional list and start hacking that first.
Yeah.
I hate to use that term, but that's the reality of the situation. So
Yeah.
Beverage, is there any suggestions or any thoughts that you have?
Mr. Mayor, in working through this budget, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
in working through this budget, I can tell you that getting down to this list of additional requests was a challenge. To suggest that there are areas that are less important than others. Unfortunately, they're on this list. It was felt from the departments that they were worthy of council's consideration. So this is, as I mentioned at the beginning of today's exercise, this is a very big challenge. And in order for us to, I wonder if it's not the exercise of just understanding where council kind of wants to fall and allowing us to bring back options and going and digging back again. But that's completely, there's two different ways to do this. But at this moment in time, on this list, we really worked hard to bring you a budget that wasn't, this is not a Cadillac budget by any stretch of the means. So.
Do we know off the top of our head how much of this budget's been impacted by provincial government downloads? For example, what our fine revenue normally would be compared to the additional portion that they're taking? Because that would be very telling. There's $20,000 for hazardous waste.
Yes, certainly through with the fines revenue, even though there may not be a change between 21 and 22, it did drop when that was downloaded by around $500,000 within our budget. So that is from a previous year, but if we still had that, we would have that included there. There'd be some offsetting costs with global for that, so I would say that would sort of round out to around another 250 on our, towards our taxation.
So on page 82, service changes and additional budget requests. The third section where it says service changes and additional budget requests without taxation impact. If we were to adjust something in there, it would have no change in our taxation rate. But
That is correct. If it is removed, then I would remove the proposed funding for that as well.
okay, so then could we reallocate something from the service change and additional budget requests to fill that void? Does that make sense?
So to your question, Councillor Taylor, the issue with that is now you're funding ongoing operational costs from reserve.
So it's just so it's the third.
So the things that you see in there, for example, the utility, so for example, household hazardous waste, it doesn't affect taxation because it's actually on the utility bills.
Okay.
Land use bylaw term position, it's coming from reserve, but it's gonna be a short-term position.
Okay.
So when you're looking at overall, like, for example, we talked about increasing the roads budget, you don't want to be funding that from reserve because that money is gonna deplete pretty quickly, right?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well, I think you start at your soft services. The stuff that you can reduce that doesn't have long-term effects on future budgets. I mean, we can ignore roads, but then you can line up the millions it'll cost to fix them. Or you revert it back to gravel. I don't think roads is even, to me, it's a huge thing. Everybody in the community drives on a road or walks on a road or rides a bicycle on a road. We look at some of those softer things, stuff that we haven't really utilized during the pandemic. You know, nobody wants to say cuts, but sometimes you gotta make tough decisions. I mean, if I was to pick an area, I'd probably go to community development. Find some savings in there. I think that's where I would probably start. That's where I would look at it. If we let our roads go,
Then we don't have to spend.
well, then you might as well just line up your capital and because you start planning for years from now and having to replace all your road infrastructure. There'll be one mad community if you can't flush your toilet, shower in the morning. Basics.
So my question is, one of our biggest budget areas is parks, mowing, grass. We made some changes in terms of how we approach that. Reducing mowing schedules, and well, we were told at the time some of the savings would go back into putting money into our neighborhood park system. I'm not sure I'm seeing that. And is there areas in this area that we can look at reducing, because we have a lot of expenses with this green space. The green spaces, if we want to talk about softer services, that's a softer service as well.
Do we have any idea how much it costs to mow this grass? Like, I mean, mowing equipment can't be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But there is some savings personnel.
On parks, staying there. At Vanier, we look after that ball diamond that Vanier uses all the time. Why don't we offer them to buy it off us for whatever, they take it over, they maintain it. Because we're out there all the time cutting the grass, doing the field and everything else and that, which the only people that are using is Vanier. And we don't use it anymore at all. So we got our own people out there doing it a couple of times a week, or, you know, a week out of the whole month or whatever. It's an expense to us that I don't think that we really need to take on if we could. If we're not using it, we don't need it. maybe let's sell it to them, they want to buy it or do something, but they pay for it.
Those diamonds are maintained, they're just mowed. So,
I don't know,
But didn't you want to make that into an extended doggy park?
that's not the one in the back to back.
It's not the one?
No.
To make the whole thing into a doggy park then, and then get the people that are motivated, chasing dogs, push more. Maintain and sell it, but I mean, like, all intents and purposes, I agree, we have to cut soft services. So we're looking at green spaces, but like, we gotta look. What Council Presidency says, we gotta keep the importance, our roads, our water and sewer, but what do we cut? And you know, like, we gotta trim what, $250,000 a year, at least? So it's 2.7,
That
so
all depends
almost
on
300 a
what,
year.
right now, we say we're at 7.74, then we have to decide what is an acceptable increase. And then at least we know what we're targeting.
Well, 4.9 is probably acceptable because the last few years due to COVID,
But then that just maintains the same service levels as last year. There we know, that's all we're.
well, maintaining isn't a bad thing as long as we're maintaining everything. The previous years, we didn't maintain some out of our control, like we all heard roads. Well, that was a lack of maintaining. And then we're hearing in order to maintain roads, we need to up the budget. So there's an extra 1% just to do maintenance of tar and et cetera. So I guess, yeah, we gotta figure out, because with no extra reserving, we're looking at almost 10 in reality. So now we have to like 9.5, whatever math works out to almost 10. So we gotta figure out where can we be zero subsidizing and maintain an acceptable amount of service.
the other option is to put less into reserves, which isn't necessarily a positive thing either, because you're just cutting your nose and spreading yourself for other projects down the road and infrastructure. I think the right approach is finding the appropriate balance of finding some cuts, increasing revenue where you can. You know, we're in a tough situation here. We've had a lot downloaded onto us over the last number of years, over $1 million worth. We're facing increases to Rcmp. We're facing electricity costs. We're facing insurance, salaries. So I think what we need to do is, I agree, to find out what the percentage is that this council would feel comfortable with, and then work our way back from that. That could include less reserve transfers too, if that's council's wish. I caution against that though, because we've been doing that for years and it's starting to show. So you're just kicking the ball down the road.
Is there anywhere else where where we could gain revenue?
Cat bylaw. It's the only one we have, because there is no, the only way to gain is you have to bring in business.
Well,
and
you're
we talked
not
about that.
hundreds of dollars, that's a joke.
No, but adding businesses, like big businesses bring in, that's where we can gain. Adding houses gains, but you know, that's our thing, is we don't have a high tax base. Like if all of a
There's a
sudden.
lot of empty buildings in town, a lot of empty properties in town. And as soon as the property is empty, the assessment drops through the floor, the taxes drop down to the floor. Those are some serious hurdles. You know, if nothing's developed and our assessment's not growing, we have to look for other things. If we wanted to spend money in areas, we gotta find cuts. I'd agree with the mayor. We have, between parks and community development, there's $1.6 million in there.
It'd be a place to start.
Well, I mean, they're softer services, but
I think we also have some revenue opportunities. I think some of our usage fees in some areas are quite low compared.
Agreed.
That's why I'm quite upset over the landfill, because anyway, we won't rehash that.
the what, sorry?
The landfill. You know, every little bit counts. Fine revenue. Our CPOs are out there, they're rating tickets. People may not be happy about that, but that's a revenue stream for us.
What's the lease agreement on the clinic? Like how long is the lease?
It's for another 4 years. We just signed a 5-year agreement.
Right? No, it was not.
With it.
Just an idea. I don't know how popular it would be. We have Adopt a Road. I wonder if we could have Adopt a Park, something like that. I don't know, service group, maybe. I know service groups are rather depleted these days because of, membership is down and such, but just an idea.
Page 58, disaster. We had, you said 50,000, we reduced it from 20,000. Let's be honest here. Much of that, what has been needed has been purchased. Like hand sanitizer, there should be ample hand sanitizer. Okay, there should be ample plexiglass. Everyone should have a mask. Is there any cost savings within that? We reduce it from 50, we said reduction of 20. We could reduce it another 20.
Yes, Councillor Taylor, the issue that is, it is funded from a reserve, so as we drop it, we just drop the amount from the reserve.
Welcome to council, Councillor Taylor.
Oh, at least I'm throwing out ideas.
Yeah.
Do the thing here, this is what I'm doing. On to the next page.
So just a question to administration. I realize a lot of the staff are at a 1.0. Has there been any interest in, sometimes staff members are at a point in their life where they would prefer to work a little bit less for various reasons? Is there anybody that's been, or any departments that have been asking for, more time off? Maybe they would prefer to go on a temporary, less hours.
I haven't heard myself, but I'm not privy to other departments' discussions on that.
Through the council fire. What I'm curious about, so again, this is my first budget for this organization. So as we talked about, the goal of today was to have an understanding where we wanted to get to. It's not been my experience in the past where we're making, there's no motions happening at this table at the moment. And I know that, I haven't answered well in the sense of where can we cut? Is because we put a budget that we felt was pretty fiscally responsible when it comes to what we are working with, if you will. I'm trying to word that carefully. We are most definitely, there is an opportunity, I believe, within our fees and charges. That's something that I've seen in the past where we typically bring them back at the same time. We're not in a position to do that at this moment in time. We're going to have to wait until spring, just based on sheer, the transition of many individuals and some of the understanding of where we want to get to with cost recovery on some of our items. So that, if you noticed in Sarah's, in the presentation, Sarah alluded to, in this area where cost recovery, in this area, we need to understand where this council would like to go with cost recovery on some of our other areas. So from this point, I suppose what we, because we are not making motions, there's no direction we see from this. It's just getting that sense of where we'd like to see, where council would like to see us go back and bring back some options. So maybe it's hitting the key areas in which you'd like to see us go back and drill down to versus going into one line, if you will. I'm just offering this as a suggestion because this is a hard exercise when we have, don't essentially have all of the information to be able to support why that thing should be kept in. So that would be my recommendation at this time.
Okay, then look for recommendation, then we're at 7.7. Let's see if we can get it down, then we'll put the task back. Let's see 4.9. 4.9 would be a realistic number. And then we got to cut out another, 2.7 of subsidizing. So if we can cut out 2.74 and go to 4.9, what the budget is. So if you can go back to each department and see where they can cut. So we want to cut 2.74, if that's the extra number.
So that would put us back to our base budget and no changes and everything would stay as.
Use your imagination, come back, because I see your needs and wants. I'm not against, I agree, you gave us a good budget. You didn't ask for anything extravagant, but now we're up against a challenge to set an actual rate. So I'm saying, now let's go back and figure out, because some of the stuff that's paid for, that doesn't increase, but that'd be the problem we'll pass to you. How can you bring this back, but bring it back at 4.9, so cutting 2.74 off?
Well, they're just take off the optional list and there you go.
No, but I mean, like, we can take off the optional list, but then I'm also challenging the other departments that we've been in the past. Is there anywhere where we can cut? You know, Crystal or Councilor Byer brought up, you know, maybe it's staffing is we gotta cut. Mayor or Councilor Persicny brought up that, you know, the soft services. You know, the mayor brought up, like, you know, maybe, you know, and I'm saying, maybe we gotta cut some of our snow. I mean, they don't wanna hear it, it is snow season. Last year, we had savings because it didn't snow, and we do give Cadillac service, so in a heavy snow year, that could be $400,000 or $500,000. Last year it cost us nothing. So where we cut out dust control, we cut out grass cutting, you know, we gotta go back to the basics. And let's maybe cut out some of them, because the more service you give people, they get used to it. So they automatically assume every time it snows, you gotta clean within 48 hours. We hear the whining, except for last year, they want us to sand. I mean, I don't know, we're gonna put the challenge back and see if you can figure out a way that we can keep the basic, most important services without suffering, meaning we let our sidewalks, you know, go to disaster, we let our roads go to disaster. We talked about buildings where it costs money. We need to maintain these buildings, but we have to check on them. We don't want to be 10 years from now, they're going, oh my God, what a horrible council. We have no roads, we have no sidewalks, and all the buildings fell apart. You know, and then even the mayor's comment where we don't put as much into savings, that would be a short-term fix. Just all of a sudden, instead of putting 4 million away, we're going to put away 3.5 million, so 500,000, problem solved. We now are at 2.74 tax, but down the road, we have zero money in our savings account. So I guess if you want my answer, that's my answer. I'll challenge it back to you, and then there's 6 more people that can answer it.
So I think what administration's asking is, if they were to come back, what would the number be that you'd be comfortable with? Understanding where we are. I think some of the things that council has talked about today, I think are important, more money for roads. Some of my requests, I think that some of that optional list, I think we absolutely need to do. But we can't go to the public with a 7.74. Even at 4.9, I'm a little uneasy about that, but that would be my target at this point in time.
Has there been any pandemic brings a lot of things to light, right? People, areas, departments, people see relevancy in certain stuff. I mean, you look at Alberta Health, they pull all these people back because they're not out in the community, and then they realize that those positions aren't that relevant anymore. So then they go to a halftime where they just get rid of that position because they realize that they took it away from the community and nobody missed it. And therefore it's not needed anymore, because really it was a position that somebody felt we needed, and they realized after the pandemic. So have we done a gauge of our community and look at our employees and go, you know, they haven't been doing a lot and nobody's really missed it, and we're not getting a lot of feedback from the community on that kind of stuff. Because I mean, Alberta Health is experiencing that, because they pulled all kinds of people, put them into contact tracing, and nobody missed their positions in the community. And then so they start reducing those timeframes, and away they go, because those positions were irrelevant. They were just somebody created a position for the sake of having a position. So has any kind of that exercise been looked at? And I'm granted you're new, so you're really looking at this, but you know, we've had pandemics brought a lot of things to light in a lot of areas. So I'm just curious if that has like a tested burden, honestly. There's an old saying, you're only relevant is if you took it away today, who would miss it?
One of the great things about our organization is that there's people that have been with us a very long time. And so it's not an easy exercise, because they come with that, with changes as such. There's costs that are associated with that.
But mind you, even though they've been here a long time, if you get rid of that person retires, you need a replacement. It depends what they've been doing for a long time.
This is a closed session discussion.
Would we like to move into a closed session? Can we move into a closed session? No, we can't, so.
We're not in a
Tuesday
council.
night.
It is not. Yeah. Difficulties. Anyway, I said 4.9.
Trevor. You're up, you're being quiet.
I listen to everything, but
Sometimes it's okay to be quiet.
I'll,
you get warm by being quiet.
I'll. I respect everything that administration has asked. I don't actually see that as being out to lunch either. On any other year, we probably look at that list and say, yeah, absolutely, shouldn't be a problem. But this is a real outstanding year. And it just happens to be my first year, lucky me.
That's time we get hit with.
Yeah, absolutely. So under 5, 4.9. And that will still be a ridiculously hard sell.
Mhm.
But we can't I hate to see any of the services be reduced, including some of the soft things. Like, we call them soft because I don't even like calling them soft things because they're needed things in our community. Perhaps now more than ever.
So every year we go through this.
Well, I know.
For the last 8 years or so, we've always tried to get down to as low as we can and even be able to go down to 1% or not.
But we never started at 7+ and had to go down. We usually were starting at 5.
We did last year.
We did last year, we're up. So what I'm saying is that it may be a hard sell, but I'm okay with 5%. Because we do this every year. One of these years, we're gonna get caught. And we may have to say, we can't get down to say 6%. And we may have to do it if nothing changes around here. So I mean, it's at 4.9. I have no problem going to 5%. I have no problem talking to the residents on this and supporting it. When we can be transparent and give them everything that we are trying to do in our power to get it down, to keep our town viable, and to give them the services they want 12 months a year. So I mean, I have no problem going 5%, whatever, and I like to have no problem talking to people and defending it. I mean, it's gonna be a hard sell, but we have to do it. And if we're thinking that, you know, I want to run for council 4 years, I gotta do this and do this, that's the wrong way to think.
Oh, of course.
Next year, it may be even higher. We may not get down to a target we like.
Well, as a counselor actually said, 23%.
All the more reason that we really need to address the rates that we're charging. We need to address a revenue stream in 2020. We cannot continue. If we're doing this last year, my apologies that council had to do this last year, and we're doing it this year. We can't continue to do this. We need to find other revenue streams, no matter how little or small they are. So I said 4.9, Councilor Bevan spoke the same, 5.
I'm at 5. I mean, we always look for revenue streams. I mean, our administration comes back to us every year with this, and we throw it back on them. And that's fair. I mean, they expect we're gonna throw it back on them. And we asked them to come back, and they racked their brains out and put in the overtime and that, and probably lose a little bit of sleep and get some gray hair. So I mean, as we do too. So I mean, but you know, as Sarah, she's been here for 30 years.
Thanks.
And she doesn't have one stitch of gray hair.
But it is tough. I mean, it is tough. And you know,
Whatever, sorry, go ahead, Sue Beveridge.
Just, as we've noted, 3.324% is obligations, as far as things that we have, this council has no control, unfortunately, and administration has no control. So that leaves 1.66% out of, say, for example, 4.99%. So just you know, and so that just allows for a little bit, and that's okay, and that's what we'll work with.
What were our tax increases over the last 5 years? Do you recall? We had a 0, and then we had, I think, a 5, and then we had a,
I'd have to go back to clarify, but I know we have had a 0,
I
we did
never
have
won
the
a
one last year,
0.9.
the 1% last year. Mike's busy trying to quickly
Yeah.
bring something up for us on that.
so the challenge is because of how property assessment works and how people get their bills. It's not like income tax where a little bit comes off the check. It's, you see it all at once, you're like, oh my. And then the province takes their 40%, which people don't understand, that we don't get to keep that money. You have to ask yourself the question, your monthly, say you're paying $300 a month in municipal property taxes, what do you get for that? Well, you get snow removal, you get policing, you get the fire department, you get to enjoy the parks, you get to have streetlights on your street, all these different things. And I look at my phone bill compared to what I pay in taxes, I think I get pretty good value for what I get for municipal taxes. Unfortunately, from a public point of view, they don't see it as just bad, evil government being inefficient.
What they see is, I'm getting the same things I got last year for 5% more.
Yeah.
That's what they're seeing. So somehow the communication tool on Live Stream is to communicate what has happened within this, how much money has been offloaded to us that now we're having to make up for. Right, there's a communication tool to say that this isn't all big bad town government. There are other things beyond our control. There's a communication tool, and it's like Councillor Bevan's saying, a selling point, like that helps with the selling point to say. So that's the issue we face.
Mr. Cassie's looked up the increases for last year's.
2017 was a 0, 2018 was 1.9, 2019 was 3.9, 2020 original budget would have been a 1% increase. However, given the pandemic and the emergency budget, it dropped by 5, and then was increased back in 2021 by about 6 or so to get back up there. But the equivalent, if it had all been normal, would be another 1. So 2020 would have been a 1%, 2021 was a 1%, and then whatever is for 2022.
So
it's catching up to us, the low tax increase, because we have not kept up with the inflationary pressures.
The cost of everything's going through the roof.
Yeah. And unfortunately, unfortunately, we see it in our household budgets,
Yes.
but it affects the municipality, which we have to pass on to households. And I really feel for people that are
On a fixed income.
on a fixed income, or like, it's ridiculous. I don't understand how insurance is going through the roof, and electricity and all this stuff.
I understand.
Basically, unless you work in commission sales, most people are on fixed income.
Yeah.
My household's a fixed income. Every dollar affects my household, right? So.
Yeah.
Right, like really, at the end of the day, like if you work for wages and you're not self-employed and have fluctuating business, you're really, you get the same wage each month. Yeah, so some people are, I understand you're referring to seniors and so forth. But you know, people who still have mortgages have a lot of bills, and everybody's on the same thing. It's all relevant to where you live and what you have, so. We're gonna have to increase taxes, there's no way around it. It just comes down to how much we want to increase it. It's never fun.
No.
If I may share that municipal price index screen again, it kind of just shows on a visual. So you see, and if you look, it starts at 17 and 18 and 19. Remember that solid blue line was the NPI, so basically the inflation for municipal purchases, and we were below. And that I think it just shows, because we did do a lot of those lower tax increases, we weren't even keeping up with the original NPI. That's why when we showed you this graph, it shows that in the end we will get to where we need to be. But I think that the beginning of this graph just kind of shows how we were always behind the 8 ball, if you like, with even just doing inflationary increases to our budgets. And as the mayor mentioned, this does end up catching up to us eventually.
Who spoken yet, Mr. Mayor?
Ed.
Yes. Well, Yeah, well, provincial downloading, that's a big problem, and that's not much we can do about it. We can lobby, but whether we can listen to or not goes, is anybody's guess. But I'd like to think most people are aware of this, but sometimes they aren't. And we have to make tough choices, and this is what we're looking at. Certainly 4.9 would be better than 7. But costs are horrendous right now, supply chains being as they are, and it's going to affect everyone, including council and residents.
Crystal?
I think the 4.9 is, my eyes widened a bit when I saw that, and they widened even more when I saw 7.7. It's I think the low tax rates, it's caught up to us. It's beyond caught up to us. We tried to cut things during COVID because that was an emergency, and we did the best we could with the information we had. And now we have more information, and I think that 4.9, 5% is it's inevitable. But the service changes that are on here that make up that 2.7, that's also a part of our asset management plan. That's also a part of, keep maintaining our community and keeping up with maintaining our buildings and our infrastructure. And I don't think that we can neglect that. It's been neglected, whether not on purpose, but it's come to light. We have the information that we do need to be putting money into that, and I don't think that we can afford to take that away. I look at, we talk about our community or our town organization, and we mentioned, and I've heard numerous times, that it's a very lean organization, and I understand that. Are all of our contracted services, are they also lean? Like how do we gauge that? Are we the only ones making the cuts? Are within our own organization, or what other cuts can those organizations make too? Is kind of what I'm wondering. I just don't think that we should be the only people being lean within our organization, right? We still have, a mandate and a commitment to the community to, to maintain our roads and everything, right? The hard or soft services. But I just, over the past 4 years, I've seen the perspective that it's only up to us to be lean. And we haven't talked to those outside organizations to see if there's room for them to be lean as well.
Team?
Oh, you want me to go again? Okay.
You said 4.9, right?
Yeah, I'm 4.9, and I started it, put the challenge back on them. The only thing I'll add to that is something you said, Kevin, was maybe we can, because after hearing Councillor Byers' thing is the 2.7, if we put 750,000 into savings, and wait, they don't need to hear that now. We want to go ahead and do your cut. I'll have a solution for you later.
Great. Peter already said he was 4.9.
Yeah, well, we're facing some higher taxes. It'd be nice if we had a lower level government to download onto.
Can we do that school divisions? No.
So, we're faced with challenges. So, I'm definitely going to support a tax increase. We don't really have a choice, just to meet certain criteria, but we do have to think outside the box where we can find savings. So, if it's 4.9, it's 4.9.
Savings is one thing, and then into the next year is revenue.
Well, really, if we want to, Edson's really busy. We shouldn't have as many empty buildings as we have. I'm sorry, and that right there. And we talked about the other night at council. Like, we have one property, it pays 40,000 a year in taxes, and if it was filled, it'd be 70,000. There's $30,000 right there. That's one property. This is one property in Edson. If you just drive around, look at all the empty properties. So we need to get Edson back in business, and that's where it starts. So, maybe this is the year we do dip into reserves a bit, and with some new energized people in our community that are gonna fix this problem and move us forward, and in a year's time, we go, look at the great position we're in. So sometimes that's what we gotta do.
You bring up a point, Councilor Pisichny. We have this I don't think would fund our operational, but it's something administration, we need to talk about Hillendale. We've done some things there. Unfortunately, lumber prices and other factors such as COVID has hampered us. But we have a lot of liability out there. It was, I think it was the right decision for the council at the time to get that development going based on the information of the day. But we haven't seen houses being built. We have an inventory shortage right now in our community. I think that's a short-term thing, but what can we do to drive some more development out there? Having lots sitting empty is doing us no good. The infrastructure continues to deteriorate, and we have no revenue coming in from the vast majority of properties. How many vacant lots? 90 vacant lots.
Something like that.
So what can we do to get that going?
You know, I had an interesting conversation with some people that currently live in the county. And so we wanted to buy their property, and they looked at building in town. But just the cost of lumber and the cost of a house, they said it's gonna start at $600,000.
Yeah.
So it is something maybe we could look at. Yeah, I mean, there's other communities I know across the country that have had sales. And sometimes it's not great to not sell it what you wanna sell it for, but once you put a house on there, you're generating revenue. So it's maybe one of those areas that we can look at.
We have paid off the debenture, correct?
Yeah.
So at this point, now it's cash in hand. And I hate to say, like, at some point, you may have to cut your losses. I don't know whether we're past that point, it just might be. But cash in hand is what we need. And we need then to create, collect tax revenue from someone buying that property. Even if they just bought the property and held on to it, at least then we collect something.
And every new house is, I mean, the current prices, it's gonna be a brand new house, it's gonna be $500,000 to $600,000. Where's our number on that? $3,000?
There is option, we talked about capital reserve, there is an option to fund a little bit of economic development from reserve for 1 year. In order to get things kickstarted, going back to the long haul, it's just to get things kickstarted. As if it's like a capital plan to start economic development or something like that. So it's less of a tax hit, but in the long haul, will bring in revenue.
So the good thing with getting houses built or new building construction, now you're creating jobs, you're creating other wealth within the community. We are a busy community. I talk to mayors in other communities and they're like, I wish we had the problem you have, as their hotels are empty and they don't have anything going on. And so in terms of that, I think that we are very fortunate, but fortunately as a municipality, we see expense associated with that. We don't necessarily see revenue. So I really think that we also need to, like I mentioned, look at Hillendale and do some things and try to get some things going there.
Okay, with that said, the other communities, so I mean, we're always looking outside the box. We are one of the busiest areas in Alberta, and we're struggling. What are the other guys doing? Like the other town, because my fears with Hillendale, I would bet money, we could say the lots are sold for $1, and we would not, and you buy them for $1, but you must build a new house within a year. So if you put them up for $1, that would be, we gave the lot away and we got taxes, we still wouldn't sell it out because like even what you're saying, like we like to build it. So I'm saying with all of it, you could put in virtually 50 cents on $1, but you must build within a year. And it's, not just spec home. And we probably wouldn't sell to 90 young. Right now, we have a temporary shortage because we have extra people in town that rent in every basement suite, anything available is being rented. But on the long term, because we tried reducing the prices and I don't think we got one interest. So even if we went 50 cents on $1, blowout sale for the next 12 months, but you must build a house and have someone in it and pay taxes. We probably wouldn't sell more than maybe 5, 10, because as mentioned, the cost of building is too high. That's out of our control because their fear is there's lots sell for what the low end 95 to 120, 130, like the bigger lots. But even if you're buying a house for 60,000 for the lot, half price, the price of your house went up 200,000 or 150,000. So then 2 years from now, you're going, holy Jesus, I want to sell it. I paid too much. So it's a great idea to unload our lots, but at this present time, we have very little people that would even jump on it because the cost of building is too high. So it's not our fault. What I hear in the room too, some of these buildings are empty. But if you look at some of the buildings empty, what the pandemic did to us as well, and you hear it from businesses, people got used to shopping otherwise, like we said. You get used to doing something different, they're never coming back. Because even when you talk to people in the retail business, you know, I can buy furniture online. I can buy all my products, I can buy groceries, everything online. People got used to that. I never wanted to see it, it speeded it up. Some of our shops in town will never return to what they were. We can use our imagination, like Councillor Byers said, high-speed internet. That is a very good thing. If we can get that out there, maybe we could fill up some of our shops downtown. Some of the people that I'm saying, the Amazon of the world, all they do is to do online shopping. They could rent one of our little buildings on Main Street where they don't have parking. They got 6 staff members in there and they work on computers. So I think we got to change how we think. Some of the businesses are never coming back of what they were. But the Hillendale lots, that's a temporary solution. We could sell the entire thing out to a developer and get $5 million. The money's come and gone, unless someone builds a house. We didn't gain anything.
All right, we have capital to go through. Do you got enough direction, administration? We want to take a 10-minute break?
Yeah. Trevor, you want to go start my truck?
Ladies and gentlemen, good to go, Steve? Yep. Now the fun part, the capital budget.
What will we just? But that
That's the easy part,
was the fun part, no? All right, good, more fun.
Moving on to capital. That strategic planning in August, it's very similar to what was seen there. We can run through the items that are in the budget. Unprotected services, the Edson Fire Department and the Yalehead Fire Department have jointly gone into a training tower. And these are some funds required for.
This is for an expansion of that training tower to incorporate a burn room within there, which is a state-of-the-art burn room for protection of firefighters, given that live fire training simulation. The tower is built up and running. This is one of the features that was deferred till this year to install.
Thank you. Under parts and parts equipment. We usually every year have 200,000 towards our trailer system. We also have Vision Park Phase 1, which you saw a brief part about that at the last council meeting for the Diamonds, Playgrounds and Trails. Also proposing a Wilmore Park site plan, a plan for Lions Park, looking at the placement of the park pond fountains, and then parks equipment, requesting a turbine blower and a leaf collector. And the building maintenance.
No, just.
Oh, sorry.
What is a turbine blower?
It's a huge leaf blower.
It's designed for snow removal on sidewalks and stuff. This is not operation.
Okay.
Uses jet fuel, it's like a jet engine, it just melts everything. They get it from Russia.
So is that a replacement of a turbine blower or an additional one?
In addition,
And Al, this will mount on one of our existing pieces of equipment? Or is this for
I can get back
8,000?
to you on that.
Yeah, because I'm looking for 8,000, it's not a driving unit, it would have to be attached to one of our present.
I think I believe it.
Oh, that's good steer.
$10,000 for a leaf collector. Can we just leave the leaves?
Just gold.
The bagging wagon.
So is it a leaf collector on grass, on sidewalks, on roads, what?
This is, that one more designed for cemetery. Cemetery is a very huge area.
Oh, okay.
So it's to assist that operation predominantly. They can be used in
Oh,
all
and the ground's all uneven there, you can't mow it properly. That makes sense.
So this one is like a large vacuum that would vacuum up the leaves. Okay.
We could just cut all the poplar trees down.
Add a zero to that.
Then you only have to pay for it once.
Okay.
Under building maintenance, Public Works Mechanics Bay furnace and a civic centre roof inspection. So as we've come to the first coloured one there, just with the legend at the bottom there are some projects included in this capital budget that I will be flowing through the operational budget at the very end. As they don't create an asset, they will flow through there in the books in the financial statements. So there's some here that I would be moving out to an operational through the operations, but included here within the capital. We have the multi-use facility. I've put a placeholder of 20 million there to be funded from the grants that we have received to go towards the multiplex. We will use the grant monies first. And Public Works, they just have a replacement of a 1-ton pickup.
Good luck getting it.
Did we get all of the vehicles that we required in 2021?
I don't think we ordered very many.
What I understand, there was a camera van with a lot of equipment that is due to be completed this year. We hope we finish that off.
So we had 2 in the plan. And I'm having some delivery issues on the van. So we were looking at alternative solutions that would meet our operational needs, and we actually found something that we feel works out better for our operations crew, in terms of accessing spaces that they can't get to currently. But I have to bring that back at a later time, because it changes sort of how we have the money for the 2 vehicles allocated. Doesn't change the total, but does change how much we
The turnaround.
expect to spend.
Now, does this vehicle require hay and a fence? No?
Worried about them pooping. That's your question.
Yes, thank you. So into roads and transportation, we have our infrastructure rehabilitation program, 1.2 million funding from MSI. Highway beautification feasibility design and highway crossing lights. There were 2 things that were mentioned at strategic planning.
Where are these highway crossing lights are we proposing?
So the discussion that I've heard is that there's a high priority at the crossing near the A&W. So I reached out to one of my consultants to get this number, just for a cost estimate to install some crossing lights, and that's pretty much that number right there. So
Is that just a, like flashing ambers?
that is flashing ambers, but because it's on a highway, we're gonna have to do a bunch of work with Alberta Transportation.
So make Alberta Transportation only take 10 years to let them put in crossing lights, proper one.
Does that answer your question?
I've also had discussions with the MLA's office about the province putting them in, so we'll see where all that ends up.
If we can, before we get too far, on this road rehab, is this gonna be 800,000 of studies or actually 1.2 million of real road stuff?
If council permits, Mr. Fisher has prepared a short
Oh, okay, then carry on then. You can
presentation
explain
for
it to
that
us.
to show where
Okay.
that projected money is to be spent. I thought I'd just run through first and then we can do the all the ones with the blue color, these are carryovers from 2021 that we know are going to carry on. So the funding for these obviously came over with that as well. The orange color, 2 projects that the province are planning to do, and we have a monetary obligation to those. So I always make sure that that is readily funded in case those projects come through. Under landfill, there's the proposal for doing a composting cell at the landfill. You see with the funding again, the county helped fund our capital for the landfill as well, at the same 35% rate.
And we are required, for the new councillors, we are required to do that as a part of our landfill approvals.
Okay, okay, we're gonna question these later, or can I ask questions on this
You can
one?
ask questions as we go.
Okay, landfill compost can't put because they were gonna do it before, we're too close to the airport. You cannot attract birds.
It is a requirement from Alberta Environment
Yeah.
that we put this in there, and it's not for food waste, it's for other organics.
Okay, because I know when they looked at it, it's too close to the airport. Okay,
Under our energy projects, this is some of the projects been identified by our energy manager position. So with the civic centre, there's the replacement of the boiler and moving everything to LED lighting. And for public works, moving all their lighting to LED as well. For the airport, this is another area where most things are cost shared with the county. So you'll see the tractor and the mower deck under this budget are cost shared with the county. However, the terminal building you see there is not. Based on our agreement, our cost sharing agreement with the county, it is a 50-50 split between our operational deficits, so revenues less expenditures, and also on any equipment that we purchase for the purposes of operating the airport. The terminal building is on the town's assets, it's owned by the town entirely, and that asset doesn't come into the current, under the current agreement of cost sharing with the county. Under
So they get to
utility,
use it for free, it's basically.
So when you're talking repairs, this isn't upgrades, this
this is just
maintenance.
repairing. Yes, I'm sure if we were to expand or if the family, we would approach the county on a separate.
Okay.
Yes, separate meetings for those. Under utilities, so there's a lot of carryover there. There is one new one popping on, the reservoir retrofit. And at the bottom there in the purple, you see a sanitary mains condition assessment. Obviously to assess the condition of our sanitary mains, and also a water master plan. And there are two other things that would flow through operations because they don't actually create an asset. So with any questions on any of that before we go back to the road rehab or the infrastructure rehab program?
So just on the reservoir retrofits, that's to retrofit the other reservoir that didn't collapse.
Yeah, well, kind of. So, just so everyone's got some backstory. Previously, we have 2 above ground storage reservoirs up in near Grand Prairie Trail. So 63rd Street, and in 2017, late 2017, there was a water break and we ended up creating a vacuum inside of one of the tanks and it collapsed. So we had to repair the roof, and as a result of that, there were some issues identified with the systems there. So we've done a little bit of work through our operations budget, but there's still some upgrades required to basically prevent ice formation from forming inside the tank. And so this would be doing work to address that. So it's adding an active mixing system, making sure that the boiler hopefully so that this doesn't happen again. If it does, then it might have a heart attack. That's a joke. I'm not going to die on you guys. It would be very stressful.
Any other questions before we go back to the infrastructure rehab? Okay, Mr. Fisher, would you like to swap chairs, and Mike will get that ready for you.
So most of this, what I'm going to go over is just for context. So we kind of talked a little bit about some of our challenges throughout the day already. In the past, like this year, we had $1.2 million that was dedicated to road. This going forward has been sort of rephrased as infrastructure capital. So we can direct some to our other assets that also need some work. So just going through town, I'm going to go through kind of area by area here. So the blue highlighted roads there, those are actually areas where we have 70 and 90-year-old water pipes. So I think we've had a sort of an increasing number of breaks on them going forward. So at some point we'll have to look at replacing those, and it also affects our fire flow. Often those, because they're so old, they're a little bit undersized. I'm waiting for slide 2. This is from our 2017 municipal servicing report. So this was kind of a look at our sanitary system. We did some inspections. Anything that's red on this map is identified in that report as a high risk area where we probably should be directing some resources. Just to give you guys some context on those, when we're inspecting them, we often see a combination of issues. So these are for specifically the high risk areas where we might have settlement of pipes that will impede flow and reduce capacities. We have broken sections of pipe where water can get in and eventually lead to failure. And we can have a combination of things. So we end up with a sag and a crack, or a sag and joint separation, or just like multiple cracks. The longitudinal ones are a little scary because that's the the phase before they fail and actually collapse. So just highlighting on some of these photos, because they don't show very well. In the upper right, we've got two longitudinal cracks and one circumferential in that area. On the other one in the middle, we've got a service that's kind of destroyed around the edge where it's tied in, and then a circumferential crack. We also have identified sewer capacity issues in town. Again, this is all in our municipal servicing report. It's available and posted online publicly at our town events and webpage. So it doesn't show up very good here, but anything that's yellow is sort of one of those areas. And they're sort of risked into different areas. So some of the higher priority ones are capacity issues in your more frequent storm events. So in terms of a 1 to 5 year event, or 1 in 5 year event, and some of them are 1 in 25 year issues. So those ones would be sort of risked at a lower priority or lower concern than the 1 in 5, because that's going to happen more frequently.
Pat, can you just go back a sec?
Yeah,
So didn't we already deal with this in here?
part of it, yeah.
Yeah. So some of this has already been addressed since.
Yeah, just in this plan, only that one section.
Okay.
And it's stops at the north edge of the park, right? We didn't go any further into the neighborhood.
So basically from here down to here, that section.
That's correct, yeah.
It's because we built a spray park up the little pipe.
Off to the side.
Broken.
Yeah. This
Before rush hour.
this map is for context. So this is our storm system, our current storm system. Mains only. And the red dots are areas where in a 1 in 5 year storm, our mains don't really have capacity to capture all the rainwater, and we have flooding at surface. So that gets diverted down the roads. These are
What's the colors on that previous slide?
in terms of red dots,
Oh, you have green.
green,
This is sanitary or storm?
storm. So green is where we're running below peak capacity. Yellow is where we're exceeded peak capacity, and red is just not great.
So Pat, can you just explain what exactly that scenario is like, that our stormwater management, that we don't have enough of them along certain areas, or the holes aren't big enough, or they're plugged up, or what, or they're too high? What does that actually mean?
Not enough ways to get the water into the pipes.
Okay.
Not enough capacity on the downstream end to let all the pipes drain properly. So what happens is in those storm events, you would see water running down the roadway more than we would actually be, or at a greater level than we would expect. So in the municipal servicing plan, we sort of adopted a standard that in a 1 in 5 year storm event, we really don't want flooding at grade.
So in Hillendale, I see there's some reds. Is that where the storm drains are pushed up above the infrastructure?
Potentially. Well, the storm is pushed up above the infrastructure there, yeah.
Is that why it's red?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So
Just say brand new neighborhood should be built. And it was designed to handle the whole thing, including the multiplex site, so.
I would have to go into. This is sort of identified upgrades to deal with those storm capacity issues, to bring it up to that sort of adopted standard. And again, this is just context, because there was an ask if we had a list of projects, and this is sort of what that list would be based on, right? So this is, again, all in the municipal servicing plan, posted publicly. This is our road matrix assessment from earlier this year. Again, basically at our current level of spending, if we were dedicating $1.2 million to just roads, at the end of 10 years, we can show a decrease in service. All of our roads will be in worse condition. I'm not proposing this year to spend $1.2 million just on roads. I think we've got some other issues that we would also have to spend some money on. So what I was proposing to do in that $1.2 million is deal with these areas that are highlighted on this map. This is sanitary capacity issues. So in those 1 in 5 year storms, that's the trunk that sort of feeds that northern part of town.
36 inch main.
I have to go back and double check the size exactly. So that's about $650,000 of that budget is what I'm estimating to reduce the the flooding issues in that area in northern part of town. The second thing that I'm looking at is we've had a bunch of sinkholes show up between 4th and First Avenue on 51st Street. I've done some repairs in there, temporary. And we've had more than one. So the bottom right photo there is sort of an example photo of what's in the ground. So I think we need to address that so we don't have another large scale collapse on that road.
Is that the bottom collapsed up?
Yes, it's really, really fascinating. I thought it was frost, but it's still 6 or 7 feet deep.
And that's sanitary or storm?
Storm.
That's weird.
Yeah, and so that's I didn't grab my notes. Anyways, it leaves about $250,000 for other things that I was going to direct to the road stuff that I had designed this year, but didn't get to. So that was primarily up around Skyview, but that I can play with that and see where it needs to go. That's an upgrade there. So because this is funded from MSI, we do have restrictions on how we can use this money. So it has to be directed towards an upgrade. It can't be doing maintenance activities or small patches or anything like that. It has to create sort of a new asset. Any questions or concerns with that one?
You know, we were depressed already and you just kind of made us more.
So Pat, that area where you're gonna do the storm sewers is, that's obviously on a street, so we have to pave that street as well?
I'm really hoping on the storm one on 51st, I'm really hoping to try some trenchless rehabilitation there.
Okay, so just going underground, so we don't have to do.
I'll still have to do some surface stuff, but not as much as.
Because when you said 650,000, I go, you sure you're not touching the street as well?
No, I'm trying to do it trenchless there.
So you're proposing we're not doing any roads then, because I'm seeing all the sewer 600, so 1.2 infrastructure. I've left about 100 grand for roads,
I've got about 250 left for roads.
so we can buy tar.
Call that the capital project.
It
That's
does,
the coal mix too.
it would do a small portion, right? So I have a cul-de-sac designed already. So that's about what that would get us.
So then with our money in savings, which we never like to take, and when the road guys came to us and said we're spending 2.2, it would probably help you a lot is if we would transfer $1 million out of savings into infrastructure. So paying it forward today, because if we could spend $2 million this year, probably 10 years from now, we'd be saving about 5 or 10 years.
I think that would be a Sarah question in terms of what our reserves would look like.
Well, no, I'm just thinking, like, I mean, like, say, we are putting money in savings account for buildings and projects, which is something needed. But if we could spend more, because now you're showing us these storm sewers and how they're falling apart. At any given time, if we have a weird winter like we had last winter, if we get the hot and cold changing, and I think in a way it's changing and our roads are going, which somewhere we can blame on lack of maintenance. I think some of it is virtually Mother Nature. So if all of a sudden we had a weird year, some of these old lines, we could wake up in the spring and have a lot of damaged lines, especially when you're seeing the ones that are 70 and 90 years old.
So the 70 to 90 years old is specifically to the water piping.
Okay.
What kind of pipe is it? Cast iron. So, but they changed standards at one point, so they have sort of design life. So they're both actually approaching the end of their design life. That's too detailed at this point, but to your question, we haven't really looked at the storm main lines in very much detail. So I don't have any camera assessments. That's sitting there, I think, 2 years in the capital plan. To spend some time looking at the condition of things. In terms of, does spending more save us money on our infrastructure in long term? Probably. I think it's a conversation of, can we afford more?
Well, the only thing I'm
And
saying
how
is,
does that affect us long term?
last May, when we got that report from the engineering firm on our roads, they clearly said, if we keep up spending $1 million a year in 10 years, our roads will be a disaster. If I'm interpreting the report right.
Worse than, they'll be in worse condition.
They'll be in worse condition than what we are today, so we have to double what we spend. Because if we just keep up $1 million a year, we're just gonna be keeping our head above water, and in 10 years from now, we'll still be treading water, and our roads will be worse. Okay, thanks.
So to Mr. Fisher, I think what you've presented there needs to be done, but I'm challenged with not doing any road work next year. I think we have opportunities within our reserves to do more. It comes down to capacity, and are there areas in which you don't need to do underground infrastructure where you could do paving? Where that money could be used. Obviously pavement's very expensive, but not as expensive as that underground infrastructure. You know, I look at areas like by the Independent where we have heaves and holes and everything. Is there anything we can do in those areas to address that without spending a whole bunch of money with underground infrastructure?
The Independent one is a tricky one because I need to finish Lost Creek. So that one is got to do with the pipe is floating out of the ground. That's specifically where we've got that hump on the highway and up into the street a little bit. So what we're trying to do with the Lost Creek project that's funded this year is reprofile the drainage course where that storm pipe that's coming out of the ground is. So we want to lower that and divert and lower the ditch profile a little bit so we can lower those utilities long term. So don't know that I would be able to address that until that project is done. In terms of spending more money on roads, if it's coming from an infrastructure reserve, there are fewer restrictions in terms of how that money is spent. So if you wanted to address patching or individual heaves, there's a little bit more leeway in how we would do that. Does that help?
Yeah,
Answer your question?
so just to follow up to that, I know that we have, I'd be in favor of putting another $1 million in next year for roadworks and not putting $1 million into the future civics cultural facility next year in order to start dealing with some of these. People are going to complain about roads no matter what, but we have like huge heaves that every time I drive over, I swear at myself. You know, and you know, you've showed the map of some of those areas where that's happening. So, and then I also know, like I live up in West Haven, that pavement's 25 to 30 years old now. It's gonna start needing replacement. So, I know we've done West Haven Drive. I think Tiffin's probably in the same situation. That we started addressing this. If the underground infrastructure is good, can we just do an overlay or what that looks like?
Yeah, so some of that is related to those condition assessments, right? So understanding, for example, there's a space where the road is kind of starting to disintegrate. I'm thinking of specifically, but I haven't had a chance to get in there and actually look at the sanitary system. But it's old enough that it's possible that we've got some issues there that we would have to fix, and it would be kind of, it's a sad thing from my seat if we have to cut new pavement. You know? So I think some of those things we have to look at. But there are spaces where we don't have utilities where we might be able to direct money to address some things or buy some time. If we're looking at a longer term underground plan or deal with some big heaps, because there's a lot of them that showed up this winter. More so than previous, I think.
Quick question.
Thanks. I was gonna actually mention the same thing that Mayor Zahara said about that 1 million that's getting added to the future civic cultural facility reserve, which we don't have. We haven't developed what exactly that plan is. We know that we need to have money if there's an opportunity. But I don't think we have to keep adding to it, and that's just my perspective. I would definitely be in favor of putting that $1 million into roads if you have the capacity to accept that, accept those funds and turn them into projects.
Probably gonna be done by a consultant.
So I guess taking that $1 million, and say if you had $1 million, do you have the manpower to use that, or do you contract that out?
In the capital program, this is contracted.
Just contract.
So
if
I
we-
still
if
have
we-
to sit at the table and give them some direction. But
So if we provided the funds, it could be done within the calendar.
I believe so.
Yeah, you know, I'm in agreement with that. We move $1 million out of there, but I'd like to see you come back to us and say, okay, I can do $1 million of the work. But if I had, say, another $500,000, I could do more for a road system in town. Like I know we got 3 million here now, with total of 4, but if we took, say, 2 million out of there. If you came back to us and said, you know, the $1 million, I can do this, but I had $500,000 more, I could do even more for a community on roads here. I'd like to see something like that. Because we have the money there, and we could use a little more of it if we had to. And we still have a fair chunk of change in that reserve there.
I draw caution to taking money out. We haven't put any money in, so fine.
We put $1 million in last year.
Yep.
And now another
So,
million,
but
that's 2 million.
at some point, you know, when the multiplex is complete and we're looking at the next capital project, we need to make sure that funds are there. If it is going to be a future civic center, we probably need to have the cash in hand. Because if we wish to borrow could go to a plebiscite, and you will pretty much lose every time.
Well, we had a chance to have a nice facility built here,
I
and it got voted down.
understand that. That's, you're proving my point.
Somebody here, you know, helped with that. But anyway.
Right, well, you're proving my point. So I draw caution, yes, like, so we have 3 million in there. I would suggest not putting the additional million in for this year to see where we're at, because all of us, we haven't said this today, but all of us did campaign on roads. So we have to make it look like right out the hop that we're addressing this. That we've heard our residents loud and clear, and I'm willing to do that. But I'm not yet willing to take any other funds out of there.
I guess I disagree with you, because our multiplex is not gonna go for another, say, 3 or 4 years. We have a revenue sharing agreement, we can also put in another $3 million into that thing out of the revenue sharing, which would bring it back up to, say, $5 million. So I mean, we're still not losing a lot, and hopefully things get better for us going down the road where we can find some more money. We don't have to borrow as much for our complex when we build it. I mean, if $3 million to borrow instead of 9 million is way a lot better.
But if we pave that road, things will be better going down the road, it'll be smooth.
Crystal?
Thank you. I'm going to ask this question to Pat. I believe that our asset management plan has indicated in all the information that we've invested within the asset management plan, all the hardware, all the training, all the data entry, where from your perspective, we have all these red dots and red lines that mean bad things that are expensive. You know, we want to do the roads. So when I say we, sorry, I mean, council has been talking about it. And it's very easy for the public to see that is where we need to address the money. From your perspective, based on the evidence and the asset management plan, if there was an extra $1 million, how would you best put that to use for the community?
Not gonna go that far.
It doesn't.
I think that's a really important part of that conversation, is it doesn't go as far as you hope. And some of that is going to depend on what we're prioritizing as an organization. And I think that comes down from you guys to a very large extent. The capacity ones that I'm pushing this year, I think are important. I think that they help us. I really try very hard to manage our budgets fairly well on the capital side. I know I keep having to come and ask, but I would much rather be trying to get more designed and ready to go and come in under budget and do one or two more things a year than proposing. That answers the question.
Yeah, question.
I think I'm a little on the side with Peter. I think it's important. I think the consensus at the table is moved that the million reserves into this, that bumps you up to a $2.2 million budget. Doesn't quite double what you want to do, but we can get some work done. I wouldn't touch the reserves for the Civic Center because with the multi-use facility, there's grants in play there. So we may be touching that to help because we haven't got a price tag on that yet. So it doesn't hurt to have a bit of a buffer if we run into trouble in the multi-use facility. So, but $1 million is not, it goes further than no money. So I would support that because I think roads are so important. And what's even more important is the stuff underneath it, because you know what, yeah, in the wintertime it freezes, we can get it smooth, and then but if your stuff doesn't flush,
And
that
that's,
goes downhill. So
that's the Councillor Byers' point. I think the question we're asking, if we gave you $1 million, would you spend it on roads or you spend it on the infrastructure underneath, right? And
Well,
that's,
if I could jump in, just further my comments, if we take that million and do more underground, would that be, give us the opportunity to do the paving the following year? In some of these areas that we know that are problematic for us, 53rd Street is a disaster, 7th, 8th. The East End, I know we did do some paving there, but there's areas that we didn't touch, which the pavement in those areas are pretty poor at this point. So I guess come back to us with a plan, what you think is best. I do agree we have to, use that asset management plan. And I agree with what Councillor Kosichny said is with the multiplex, things may happen there and we need to have some reserve funds available to deal with that. And if things look good, then great, and we'll have more money down the road to do some of the other infrastructure work.
See, we gave you more money, now get to work.
I don't know how Sarah feels about that, but.
Oh, God, I thought you left the room.
you didn't even ask for more money, we just gave it to him.
Well, Sarah told me
That's
we were
impressive.
supposed to.
Just a question on the park fountains. Would this deal with the Centennial Park issue? So we would still not have still not have a fountain in Centennial Park because of the dredging that needs to happen.
But we're not dredging that again.
No,
We're
just-
last time.
We'd have to do an evaluation of that pond in the springtime to see what it looks like.
Okay.
I did kind of talk to our parks team both. I know the current location where it's at is not suitable because there is no depth between the top of the water and the silt. But we could explore a possible slight adjustment to the location if we have some depth in there, but we'll have to evaluate that in the spring just to see where that water level is in relation to the silt buildup.
This one would replace the one in Hillendale that's non-functioning. All right, Sarah.
This would be the capital budget for 2022. That will come back to you on November 25th. I believe there are some adjustments from what I've prepared. We'll make sure we look into those as well. Sorry. The next two pages, the last two pages, just an overview of our reserves. the opening balance is a sort of a projection of a 2021 balance. I won't know those until exactly till year end, so these balances may change based on some of those actuals for the end of 2021. But all you saw before you through operating and through capital is shown within these reserves. Anything on the left-hand side of the grey line is up to base budget. We're looking at the operational side, and anything on the right-hand side of the grey line is incorporating the additional budget requests, etc. So we do have, you see, a capital reserve and an operating reserve. Some of these do interchange. So you notice anything that within these budgets that is green, reserves that is green is actually, this is on a capital reserve, but they're being used for operational. In conversely, on the operating reserve, anything green there is being used towards something within the capital budget. So I won't go line by line through each reserve, but if anyone has any questions on anything they see there, please put them forward.
Sarah, I thought we were gonna do something with that Johnson Estate General. Hasn't been there for like 40 years. We have no idea. We are.
Under
What are we doing
the
with
capital,
Oh, I see it. It's going to
the
Wilshire.
Wilshire Pond.
Then it'd be $1,000. Good, that looks better. Perfect.
We buy a couple benches and just make sure that's a zero balance at the end of the year.
Right, the benches we want for the seniors on 40, what street was that now? 47, there you go. And then we'll call them Johnson Estate benches.
60, guys.
Is it 46?
It's 46.
46.
46. The lodge address is 4619.
Okay,
So
there,
46, sorry.
Yeah.
Go back in the meeting, change what I said.
you got
46.
$1,600 to buy benches and they can be the Johnson Estate benches.
Well, if you spend it on the Wilshire Pond, that is technically what was originally designed to be Johnson Estates. So
Yes, it's I should maybe rename the reserve, but it is the Wilshire Estate is the same as the Johnson Estate.
Oh, okay.
how often do we have to dredge the storm management ponds every how many years? Not since it was built. To about 2004, 2005.
In that ballpark, yeah.
Something like that, you know.
But if we're dredging that Bench Creek, look what happened to us last time. We gotta be very
We're not
careful.
dredging, essentially.
Huh?
We're not dredging much.
So we're just not gonna put the sprinkler back in?
They're
Not
reviewing.
this year.
Okay,
It's just gonna be a creek.
without a sprinkler or whatever, the blowhole thing. Fountain, that's the name.
All right, operating reserve. Less and less and less.
Operational reserves, yes, but we are using some of our energy reserve there, about 500,000 of that towards the energy projects that have been identified by our energy manager. So that's the that's what that reserve has been earmarked for. So that's sort of one of the bigger amounts within the operating reserve.
The most grant. It's a term name for a grant.
It was the most they could give us.
That's what they've written
Yeah.
as a.
If it came from the federal government, we've been called a moist grant.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doing that, because you don't want you to do any moistly speaking.
So Sarah, for that extra franchise amount, would it not make sense to put that 123 allocated into the Fortis and Echo?
Into which, sorry?
Into the Fortis and Echo energy reserve?
Yes, that was that we talked about earlier, so I can remove that. That was just, I wasn't sure we in council getting to see.
One of the things that I think we chatted about is, can we look at underground burial of the lions and around Mary Bergeron and Parkland Lodge? There's one section there that hasn't been completed. You know, we have all these beautiful new buildings in that area. I know Councilor Pisichny has brought that up, and I spoke to the previous town manager as well. That was always supposed to be part of the plan, but didn't get completed, so. I know it may not happen next year, but we should plan that out for 2023.
There's a pretty big field there that's surrounded with high power lines.
Yeah.
Or just like kinds of things that they could.
All right, anything else?
That concludes my presentation today.
All right, well, we're over time. CO Beverage, I don't know if you have any concluding remarks. I'll just say I want to thank everybody for coming in on their Saturday. I'm sure we all wish we were doing something else. Hopefully we didn't speak moistly on each other. And thank you, Sarah and Mike, for your hard work in putting all this together. Daniel for organizing, Steve and the rest of the GM team here for all your work on this. We still have some work to be done, but
We're doing on a Thursday night till
yeah,
midnight.
we're doing a Thursday night, so be there or be square. All
I'll
right,
bring my jam.
with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.